from the southern mountains, headwaters, a part of Appleshop.
I said, I don't want any heavy equipment on my property. He said, well, we were just going to take the bulldozer and the rig up there. And I said, you're going to do what? I said, don't go across my property. And then, of course, I let out an oath. And I told him, somebody will go to jail or somebody will go to hell if you come across my property. Well, we're going to leave it in better shape than we found it. Well, I'm not going to tell you what I said either. I did not ask for his improvement. I don't know of any issue, the women's issue. All those women were killed in New York City in that factory until they took action. Miners got nothing until they took action, until they were willing to die for it. So I don't know. All I know to do is to be an activist.
I remember the day that my granddaddy died, gone rise again. And they buried him up on the mountainside, gone rise again. I was too young to understand how he felt about the land. I could read its history in the palm of his hand, gonna rise again.
I'm the second generation out of slavery. People were freed from slavery. And they never moved from there. My father's father was about 3 miles from where he was held a slave. I found it so strange. They thought that slaves were here because they ran and hid in the mountains. They didn't know there were slaves here in the mountains. There were more slave women than men. And those women and the women were used. And they would sell the children. And if the master fathered those children were sold too. They say that it was founded on a religious foundation. How can you sell your own flesh and blood and be a Christian or believe in religious freedom?
Well, 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 don't worry about me. Well, don't worry about me. Well, don't you worry about me. Jesus gonna make up my dying bed.
My grandfather was in the Union Army. They used to come up and they'd say, oh, Uncle Ed, we fought for your freedom. He said, no, you didn't fight for my freedom. I fought for my freedom. And he would tell, that's when he would tell, when he fought, Chattanooga Lookout Mountain and Appomattox. And he would always say, don't let anybody do for you what you can do for yourself. And he was very adamant about his land. Because you see, by being a slave, they did not own anything. But he felt a part of everything when he became a landowner. My father worked at an ore mine, and this mine's closed. And we went to Perry County, Kentucky. I saw the Klan March when I was a child in 25. They tell me that is Bulin Mountain. We lived at Harvey. And the Klan would march through the black camp. And I remember one night they had set that cross afire. And it came one of those pouring rains, and it drenched the cross. And they left that cross up there. And, you know, when you come out, we lived over on the other side of the mountain. And when you come out, you'd see that cross, that charred cross up there. And I never thought too much about that cross until my son died in Vietnam. And we went out to the cemetery, and they had put, you know, those little crosses in the flags. And I looked at those flags, and where they had been drenched, it was one of those buckets of rain. And it had such an effect on me, because all I could see was that cross burning on that hill over there. And the way that he had died, and, you know, I just began to have flashbacks. I had to be sedated. And I said, you know, we never know what the impact that these things have on youngsters. And I think about all the things that are going on now that youngsters have been subjected to. And everybody feels like that they have to protect their side.
Which way, your blood red river run, my back when the horse to let ride.
I met him wherever the coal company store was. I passed by there, and he was standing there. He was a dandy. He was standing there, and I suppose it was love at first sight. He was a brakesman. The motormen were always white until the Union came in, and he was a brakesman. That was a part of the Depression. Some of the women would take in laundry work. I worked for the superintendent's wife for 50 cents a day. You'd buy a pound of salt bacon. You would fry the salt bacon, and you'd make gravy. You'd make biscuits. Lord, it was 5 cents a pound. And you'd make biscuits. And if you were lucky, you bought some rice, and a tall can of milk was 10 cents. And it was just a matter of survival. Well, you had the babies at home. And I remember Dr. Grant came up, and my sister, when she had her first child. And he was so out of it, he just went out and laid out on the bank. So there was a lot of butchery. My oldest child was born right up there. She was a normal birth, and there was no problems. And you stayed in the bed 7 days. I tell them now, no wonder women had so many babies, because they could, it was a time of rest. It was April the 10th, 1934, and we were in Vico to a ball game, and someone came in and said they had lynched Rex. I was 18 at that time. We heard the noise. I'll never forget that rebel cry and that squealing and the jubilee of that time. The men went back, and they worked with him. It was just one of those things. They talked about it, but there was nothing, they were powerless. And if you want to know what it means, I guess at that time, it really dawned on me what powerlessness meant and injustice meant at that time. Some blacks would talk about it, and some wouldn't, because it was such a wasted life. When I left here, nothing had been done And when I came back here in the 70s, there were several that pointed out different ones that had been involved in that lynching, and nothing was done. My husband was working down to Harlem, and they had the men on 2 and 3 days a week. My husband was a baseball player. They had booked a game in West Virginia, and they were working full time. So he decided that he would stay. He was very, very Union. When the Union came in, it gave them privileges that they had never had before. And I guess just the sense of belonging. Gary, that was U.S. Steel. They didn't unionize. Those men that were Union were willing to give up their lives to organize those men. They knew. Gus used to say, now, Evelyn, if I go out on duty tonight or whenever they call, now, I might not come back. Black miners were involved. They were very, very involved. Up at the company store, they had a canteen, whites over here and blacks over here. You know, you had to go in and you had to be served. But they would put a speck of paint on the bottom of the glass, you know, so they wouldn't mix them. And some of the blacks protested. And they wanted to know why that we didn't get the same service that they did. Oh, there's nothing about it, they would say. But then they stopped the paint, the black paint on the glasses. But there was always something there to let you know you were separate and unequal. The same thing. Well, it's not quite the same thing. They don't paint any dishes in Knott County. Carolyn was born in 43. Sonny was born in 45. Then Fred was born in 47. Maxine came along in 48. Joe in 50. So I had a very full life, and I've done housework. I was a domestic. And I remember I worked for this woman. And she had a man to come and do the yard work. She had a dog. She would let the dog come in the house, but she would not let this man come in the house. She would fix him food and stick it out the door. She would let him come in the house and eat. And I took such a dislike for her, and this was a white man. And I learned then that when you are classed, it makes no difference what color you are. You see, after they put the machinery in the mines, they mined coal with less men. And I said to Gus, I said, if you ever get without a job, I said, if they cut you off, you're getting out of here, because if you stay here, we'll lose everything we have. That Friday, they got the pink slips. That Sunday, he was on that bus on his way to New York. They had begun the building boom, and construction work was plentiful. Now, he had never run a jackhammer or any of that, but they were tearing down the 3rd Avenue L. And that was his first job. And I think he rebuilt all of New York.
Jesus is mine.
We came to Brooklyn, and we were the first block that moved into this block. There was a gentleman's agreement that no one would sell. They redlined us because, you see, the master plan was that we would never pay for these houses. And so we have held on by our chinny chin. She's been living in this neighborhood 40 years. And Mrs. Branch has been living here almost, 33. Where you see these vacant blocks and these burned out buildings, and there's nothing ever done, the ownership is not there. See, these are owned by people who do not have a stake in the community. I was a domestic, and then I was a supermarket clerk, and I got back in school. I was already there involved in the community. And the community action program put me in a position where I could go to school, where I could get a scholarship to go to school. 50. How do you build a community? We have to make people feel like there's a sense of equality, that they are equal, that their services are needed. We developed the church's involvement, all of the churches in the community. This one held the first Head Start. We had youth employment. We had a manpower training. And what we done was economic development. People were working in the daycares, people that had never worked and had never felt like they'd had an important job. Suddenly, people had a white-collar job.
Down in the valley, down in the valley, everywhere I go, everywhere I meet, Jesus is mine.
Mr. and Mrs. Williams, the Secretary of the Army, has asked me to express his deep regret that your son, Private First Class Frederick T. Williams, died in Vietnam on February the 25th, 68. He felt like it was his obligation or his duty, because we always taught them you were American first. And then the Army, they had no responsibility to bring his body back to New York. And you would think that that would be first priority, but it wasn't. It wasn't. As I said, 3 days after he was killed, he was in California. But 30 days, they were telling us they had not located the body. So many mothers and were in the same shape that I was, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting. And you get up in the morning, that would be the first thing that you would think about. And you would call. Well, we haven't heard anything yet. February was gone, March was gone, still nobody. Isn't that a terrible way to treat people? I told him at the Pentagon, don't put that flag on it. I said, if this is what my son had to die for, GD, the United States, if this is all that it means. At that time, I had that very middle class, if you work hard, you can achieve. I was very anti-welfare. I've got 9 children. I've never drawn a welfare check or any supplement. I did not know what it was like. But afterwards, I did. I had empathy for that person. it changed my whole concept of what people were, the passions of people, and what it meant, why people protested.
Everywhere I go, everywhere I meet, Jesus is mine.
We were at the Casbah, and of course, in the formal suit there, that we were in Spain. And one of those dancers was 80 years old. And there's a belly dancer in there. And it was so funny. My husband was the only one that would dance with the belly would dance with the belly dancers. We bought the house in 74. Gus came down in 75. I came in 78 because I wanted to work until I could get Social Security. He died in 78. He had a heart attack. And, but I am so happy that he got to spend the 3 years in the house because they were enjoyable years here for him. He had worked all his life. He went in the mines when he was 12 years old. And just to sit around from stoop to stoop in New York, I knew that that would be a lot of problems. And he just loved to putter around. He was so proud of his strawberries. We're going up because there are rights that we are going to ask for. That they not come on your land without notifying you, without putting it in writing exactly what they're going to do and how it's going to affect your property.
We're down here in support of Evelyn Williams to try to hang on to our land and keep it being destroyed. Well, it's, I guess it's the concern and the love that people have for justice, seeing that people are treated right. And we believe in the case of the special interest groups, the gas and oil industry, the coal industry, that they are mistreating the common people of the state of Kentucky.
That's an open well sitting up there right now. We've got a load of oil down here that needs to be put down that well to kill it. I'm asking you all to let us go up there and do that.
I asked you not to cut any further on my property. Did you honor me? When I was brought over a slave, they killed me before I got shot.
I've heard that from you. I don't need to hear about the slaves.
I don't think you have.
Your property will be the same after we leave as it is before
Is
we
this
come
right
in.
here the same that it was before you came up here?
It's just like this.
Yeah. Well, since it was just like that, I'll just sit here and see that it stays like that.
Is it you want me to write you a check?
I think we had a list of demands that we wanted in writing.
You can talk demands all you want to. It really boils down to money. How much money would you
I
want?
haven't asked you for any money. I told you I'm not a prostitute. The last 4 times they came up there, I just sat right down in the middle of the road. And they threatened to call the police. And they threatened to call Kenneth. And I said, no, you ain't gonna put me on my mama. So, but here was the thing about it. I said, what are you gonna have me arrested for? Sitting on my property reading a book on my property? You know, that would look kind of stupid. And the papers and the news would have eaten that up. Old woman carried off, and they would have had to carry me off. Sitting on the property, reading a book, fighting for justice. They will not do any additional road work, additional damage to the land, and no further water destruction, and no timber destroyed.
What happens now, Evelyn? You go back down to your house? Or?
Well, I promised KFTC that's what I would do, and I'll do it, but it's under protest. because I'd have them bring me up a sleeping bag, and I'd sit here until the police carried me off.
What rights do you think older people should have in this country that they don't have?
The right for the young people to come back and live next door to them so that we don't have to go in to nursing homes. That's one of the horrors, is that nursing home. Because we can be so much help to younger people. At one time, this was the only place that blacks could be buried. My grandfather donated this land. His whole family lived, I'm looking at the spot right through here now, right up through there. After they were freed, they lived in like a compound. One lived connecting to the other. And I look at all the properties here now that are still in the family, that have been in the families ever since they were freed from slavery. The families are still there. I came down here one time on anniversary, and people were here that from as far away as California, Washington, D.C., New York, Detroit, and all over. There were so many of them here. And they still come because it's like a homecoming.